Nah, because I'm gonna have like stuff in my teeth and I'm gonna get red sauce right here. It's high risk.
All right, welcome ladies and gentlemen to another episode of Anteater to Entrepreneur here at the Entrepreneur Center, where we hope you fully realize your dreams if you get funded, if you're understood. And there's no better person to talk about being understood and its correlation to funding than the one, the only, Shaun Sanders. Round of applause.
Thank you, dude.
All right, take it away, buddy.
Cool. Okay, I like this. So, if you have questions or something as we go, it's small group, so feel free to ask. And then online, I guess, post a comment and I'll reply later. My name is Shaun Sanders, and I am the managing partner of VentureCraft, a firm dedicated to the idea of helping really good ideas, really technical ideas, be able to unpack that complexity in a way that makes sense to normal people. So investors or people that are critical of information and usually trying to decide if they want to put money into things. So before we get started, we're going to be talking a lot about PowerPoints today, but I want you to remember that it is more than a PowerPoint. What we're going to be talking about is the most important asset that an early stage company can ever have, which is a story that people care about. People underestimate the fact that if you don't resonate with your audience, if you don't make them take it home with them, then they just go to the next pile of pitches that's on their desk or in their emails. And so we're going to talk through in this slide deck some of the data-driven best components of an effective pitch that I've been able to see through the many years in this world and the thousands of pitches I've seen and worked on. But first, a bit about me. So I've been working in the startup world for about 20 years, more than 20 years at this point. Started off in marketing and commercializing technologies, primarily consulted with Y Combinator up north with a handful of their portfolio companies, Reddit, Hipmunk, Anteater, Airbnb, primarily when it came to user aggregation, marketing, branding, driving traffic to services or products that they're trying to sell on budgets that couldn't afford really big budgets. After that, I did that for a few years before I transitioned more to an operations role, back in investor relations, then became an attorney, was a corporate counsel of a small investment firm for a few years that specialized in software development and then also investing in SaaS-based businesses, med tech technologies, things of that sort. In my marketing background, I created ad campaigns that in total reached more than 600 million people around the world. So viral ad campaigns, I animated a commercial for Adult Swim at some point. And then these days, after I realized that being an attorney is way less fun than being a business guy, I sunsetted that part of my career, launched out VentureCraft. And about half of what we do is work with scientists through the different alphabet soup agencies, the DoD, NASA, NOAA, NIH, with their phase 1, phase 2 SBIR program, or SBIR grants. I don't know if you're familiar with SBIR, but it is non-dilutive funding. It is amazing. We can talk more about that. But essentially in that role, I'm helping scientists, brilliant people with great ideas, translate really technical concepts like high photonic quantum laser beam ion scrapers into something that a regular person can understand so they can decide, is this a business worth funding? Is this a business worth investment? On the other side, I serve as a senior associate director of the highest rated accelerator in the country for grant-funded accelerator called LaunchPad. So Octane LaunchPad there, I manage the back end of our pipeline, help with quality control of how we help companies with their pitches and whatnot. So my background is a hodgepodge of various types of hats I've worn in the startup world, but at the core of it, what I like is business storytelling. So it's a fun combination of marketing, but marketing that has a payout if you do it right. To date, my clients have raised a little north of $400 million using the things that I'm going to talk to you about today. So the same structure, a lot of the slides that we're going to go through is what I sit down with my clients and try to hammer in, like this is how we're going to break down a story. Before we get started, kind of a pre-flight check. So when you're getting ready to create your pitch, when you're getting ready to put your deck together, there's a few things you got to decide on first. And these are those three things: know your goal, know your audience, and know your format. So your goal is obviously to raise money, but everyone always thinks it is like Shark Tank, where like you get up there and you pitch, and then if it goes well, and if you cry enough, then they clap, and then they give you a check, and then like everything's good. But in reality, the way it works is you present to an audience of people. Your job is to use the right words and the right format to trigger them to understand what it is you actually do, so they understand and they can appreciate, maybe get excited about it. Then they go home and they talk to their friends, they talk to their spouse, they go golfing the next day, and somebody asks them, what cool stuff have you seen today? And in that moment, if they can't remember what it is you do, the deal dies. Because they're not gonna go, again, these are people that have hundreds of decks per week that they're going through. But in that moment, if they can actually remember, if what you said got them excited enough, and if you gave them the understanding that they know what to do next, or they know how to advocate it to somebody else, then they can pass along that information, actually convince themselves in the moment to invest in you, and then maybe even kind of spread it along to some other people that they had met. This is, I just saw Alexis Ohanian, co-founder of Reddit, post on LinkedIn the other day that the way that he got bought out by Condé Nast actually started off with him, excuse me, it started off with him trying to get a newspaper to write about him. So he went to, I think he went to New York, and he met with a bunch of journalists, and nobody cared. But one of the journalists he talked to was then doing a story about startups, and talked about Reddit with the person they were interviewing. That person was the wife of somebody at Condé Nast that worked in their business development, who then contacted Alexis, and it started the wheels rolling on them getting essentially acquired. So it's never the, I'm going to convince you right now to hand me a check or hand me a bag of cash. It's always that later on, that later down the road. And if they don't have that story in their head or that understanding, then it doesn't happen. It just never happens. The next thing we got to figure out. Okay, so we know what our goal is. Our goal is to create a story that will actually stay in the mind of the audience that we're talking to in a way that they understand it, that they can appreciate it, that they can share it later. But we got to know, who is our audience? And so you have this sort of spectrum between simple and technical. So on the technical side, which is what a lot of technical founders like to do, it's where you have like a science fair project. And sometimes, I don't want to say never do that. If you're working with strategic investors, someone who knows your space inside out, someone who is deep in that world, feel free to be a bit more technical, it's fine. Or if you're having your second meeting, if you already got them hooked, a little bit more technical can help them kind of get the details maybe they didn't get at first. But your first meetings for general investors are going to be more on that simple side. Like not totally simple where you don't have any sort of appreciation of the cool tech you created, but you want to get away from tribal speak. You want to get away from all of those terms that you think everybody gets because you've been passionate now for like, you know, you've been focused on this thing for 10 years. And so all the words and the jargon and the abbreviations and this or that, we need to unpack that so that a regular person can appreciate it. Now, again, this will vary because if you have a friendly audience is usually more forgiving or more willing to put up with jargon. But the types of investors that I focus on for my clients are going to be critical, ROI focused, cynical investors who are looking at this as like, do I understand it in the first 3 minutes? Do I want to give you, 10 minutes more of my time? If I don't get it, I'm going to go on my phone and wait till it's to be done and then go to my next thing. But again, if I can get that first 3 minutes for me to understand it and have those words where I'm like, oh, okay, I get what the technology is. Those are the right analogies that I needed to cross the spectrum to actually understand it. That's what'll click. The next thing, know your format. Another huge issue that we run into. And a lot of things I'll talk about today are going to be like common mistakes or problems or things that I always advise clients against. Format is one of like the most common mistakes we see. So there's two types of decks. There's presentation decks and there's email decks. You might have noticed this is a presentation deck. Why is this a presentation deck? Because I'm here. I'm here in front of you. I'm talking to you. I'm a narrator. Everyone here, no matter how good of a reader you are, you're pretty bad at either reading and listening or listening and reading, and that's just normal. Like people, your audience will usually pick one. So if you have a really wordy deck, they're gonna either read it and ignore you, or they're gonna listen to you and ignore your deck. But the whole goal is to strike that balance. We wanna strike that balance with good iconography, not being too wordy. You're using it basically like your hype man. Like your pitch deck acts to reinforce the main bits of information that I want you all to walk away with. On the flip side, email decks are usually more wordy. Why? Because they have to be. An email deck lives without a narrator. An email deck is something that you create, you ship off into the world, you wish it best luck, and then you hopefully hear back from somebody. And so since it doesn't have a narrator, you need to have more context. Also, because the people that are reading it are usually reading it at their own leisure, it's okay to let them kind of digest it at their own pace and have a bit more text. This presentation is going to focus more on the idea of a presentation deck, but I'll make some call outs whenever we are, maybe there's a difference between that email deck and the presentation deck. Welcome to the group. I'm Shaun, nice to meet you. Also, good to meet you guys as well. All right, so we know our audience, we know our goal, we know the difference between an email deck and a presentation deck. We're gonna dive in. This is the core components of a successful investor deck. Now I say that with again, there's no right or wrong way to pitch, but the data shows that when you're dealing with a general type of audience that doesn't have any idea what you do, doesn't care about what you do, just wants to know, is it gonna make me money? Do I understand it? Do I believe it's real? And at the end of the day, is there an ROI? This is the best story arc that we've been able to show that will acclimate someone into adopting your idea of what a world looks like with your technology. So we're gonna go through these one by one, talk through it. Again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. But the first one is your problem statement. Every pitch needs to start with a problem statement. Now I say that because some people like to start with a team slide. No, you don't do that. And I'll tell you why. First off, let me start with the yes. If you're pitching to a friendly audience, if you're pitching to people that know you or people that already have an interest, then it's sometimes okay to show a team slide because it reinforces that relationship you already have with them. They get to say, oh, look, there's Shaun, and oh, those are the people he works with. And so because they're already hooked, again, it works. But again, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a critical audience of disinterested investors who you have 3 minutes to try to hook their attention. And the reality is you don't do your team slide first because they don't know if they want to know you yet. It's kind of presumptuous that, you think, oh, this audience really wants to know me. No, an investor wants to know, what do you do? Can it make me money? Are you worth an investment? And so by starting off with a problem slide, we are starting off with an idea of what does the world look like before we get into the world that could be. We want to help the audience understand what is the actual pain that you've identified that is worth solving. Why should I pay attention? Did you actually find an issue that might be worth my attention to find out oh, what's the way that you solve that? It usually comes down to how much money is lost, or is there an efficiency, or even in the med tech world, it might be saving lives. But our job is to quantify that, not just have some high, fluffy, high-level idea of, oh, the world struggles with this. No, I want to know, again, who's losing money, who is dying, who is being hurt. That is my goal. My goal is to quickly understand the extent of the pain that's being inflicted on the world or the market. And so I see this a lot of times where they'll start with some fluffy, in this case, a med tech client. This is an actual one I worked with. Hospitals are struggling to keep up with decontaminating patient rooms. It's okay, but first off, says who? Why is that? Why should I believe you? Who says that's an issue? And also, what does it mean by struggling? And also, what's the consequence of that? And what we unpacked with this client is by the lack of decontamination was leading to people dying. In fact, his personal story was tied to his own father, who was, while admitted into the hospital for a basic surgery, contracted another infection, nearly killed him, had to stay there for several more weeks while they fought off the infection that he shouldn't have gotten in the first place, which got tied back to lack of decontamination. That's a pain that the audience can relate to and understand, but it's true of any type. It doesn't always have to be someone dying. It just has to be something quantified beyond me just having to trust you that, oh yeah, it's an actual real problem. Once we have a real problem, once we have something that the audience can feel, once we've kind of depressed the audience with the reality of this is the current state of affairs, this is the current waste of money or waste of time or waste of resources or just something, we introduce the hero. And the hero is your solution. And there's this kind of fun psychological effect of again, we make the audience feel the pain make them imagine themselves in the shoes of the audience or the market that is experiencing that pain, and then we swoop in and let them know how you would relieve them of that pain. A fun part about your solution statement is it usually just mirrors your problem statement, which can help you in defining what is my problem, what is my solution. Because if the problem is cost, then your solution has to have something to do with affordability. And if it is something to do with a danger, then I want to hear safety. There's always going to be this sort of logical relationship. A common issue I see is people pitch, and their problem is more like a high-level overview of the market, and their solution is something that I kind of understand why it's connected, but not close enough to draw an assumption of why they're related. And then I'm just distracted. So they're pitching, but I'm still wondering, but wait, why? Like what are we even talking about today? Like I get what we're talking about in terms of, okay, your solution is some new SaaS product or new tech, but I'm so lost of how we got from the original, premise of what the pain was. And that's kind of the rule of thumb. Like the job of the investor or the audience is to connect dots, but your job as the presenter is to put the dots as close together as possible. Like spoon feed it to the audience so they don't get lost in sort of that journey of that story unfolding. So at this point, we have your problem, we have your solution. So we have a pain that I actually believe is real, and you've quantified it in a way that I don't just have to trust you that it's a problem. I can actually see numbers that support how this is actually an issue. From there, you have a solution that I think, man, that's novel, that's interesting. I believe that could solve the problem. It's novel in a way. You were just showing me your cup, your modular cup, which twist. Yeah, and it solves a problem. Like he explained to me the problem that he was solving. I identified with it because I have like a shelf full of like a dozen bottles at home, and then he showed me his solution, and it just makes sense. Like I get how we arrived where we were at the end of it without any logical leaps. The next step is market sizing. And the reason that we have this order is because if you do this right, if you practice it, it should take you no longer than about 3 minutes to arrive at this point. Why is 3 minutes important? Because again, psychologically, with an audience of people that don't have that built-in relationship, that's about the amount of leeway that you'll get before they might look at their phone or might get distracted. There's fun studies on this that have shown that's about the amount of attention span you have to get somebody hooked. But my favorite version is Jerry Seinfeld in one of his interviews talked about how he can go into any comedy club in the country and they'll just let him up to tell jokes. Because he's Jerry Seinfeld, of course, but he mentioned it. He says, I feel like I only have 3 minutes to tell a good joke. Otherwise, it doesn't matter who I am. They're going to get me off the stage. And it's just that idea that we're trying to get to this right here. What is this? Market size allows me to know, can I make money in this? So if I believe that you have a problem we're solving, and I believe you actually have a solution that can do it, I want to know how big is the market? Because if this is small, then it doesn't matter. None of the rest of this matters. If the market's not big enough to be investable, I don't care about the team. I don't care about how much money you can make. I just know that it's not big enough for me to put capital in. And every investor, one of your biggest enemies is the collective memory of investors. And every investor has been pitched on something that they fall in love with, and then at some point into the deck, they get to their market sizing, and it's like a, $10 million market, which again, that's a lot of money, but it's not necessarily an investable size of a market. So TAM, SAM, SOM. We're going to do a deep dive into this. If you don't know what a TAM, SAM, SOM is, we're going to get to it right now. So a TAM, SAM, SOM. Oh, yeah. Let's do a test. Raise your hands. All right. Okay. Well, that's good. It's a good split. Okay. So your TAM, SAM, SOM is usually shown by these concentric circles. Your TAM is your total available market. Your SAM is your serviceable available market, and your SOM is your serviceable obtainable market. Again, this is one of those things where let's unpack it, because who really knows what any of that means? So let's dive deeper. I'm going to use an example of my own startup. I have an ed tech company. It's a passion project. It's a side hustle. I have an ed tech company that helps law students study for the bar. We have 3,000 law students currently on the platform, 200 different law schools, 3,000 students across 200 different law schools. And again, it's something that I'm growing, and it's something that I can share with you the numbers because I know them very familiar or very easily. So the first thing, your TAM. Your TAM is an imaginary, unachievable number that no company will ever get. Apple will never achieve their TAM. Google will never achieve their TAM. No company will ever achieve their total available market. So then the question is, well, then why does it matter? Like, why do I care about a TAM if it's just some imaginary, idea in my head? And the answer to that is because it sets a boundary. It forces you to draw a line in the sand and say, if everybody who could buy my product bought my product, this is how much it's worth. And again, the value to me as an investor is because I know no one's going to do that. I know that you will never have 100% of your market, but at least I know that if it's a big enough market, I can get an idea that if you fall short, it's still worth talking. Now, again, that's not good enough. It's never good to just be like 1% of a billion is blah, blah, blah. But it's enough to quickly skim through. Because if I see this as like 10 million, 5 million, I know that, look, good luck. Like, if you need help, I'm here for you, but it's just not investable. It's not big enough. But when I start seeing big enough numbers, I know, oh, okay, let's learn more. Let's see how they're going to attack that market size. So using my example, at any given point in the United States, there's about 115,000 law students. My app costs $50 a month. And so you do with the math on that, my TAM comes to about annual $68 million. So that means that I can never make $1 more than that unless either A, I raise my prices, or B, there's a sudden surge of people that want to be abused in law school. Like, those are the only two levers that can pull. So now I have my TAM. My universe is defined. The line is drawn around that universe, that there's $68.7 million on the table for me to attack. The next step, you might think it's SAM, but no, you actually want to go to your SOM. So after you define your TAM, you're going to drill down and zoom into that serviceable, obtainable market. What I love about the serviceable, attainable market, the SOM, is that you can be honest with it. Yes, it's okay. We won't all look at you. No. You can be honest with your SOM. Your SOM recognizes that you are a startup with limited resources, limited time, limited everything. And so what the SOM wants to know is, what can you dominate in your first 5 years? Like, knowing that you can't do everything at once, what is your strategy, usually tied to your go-to-market strategy, that you can just destroy in that first 5, the lowest hanging fruit that you're going to go after first? So take me. I'm one person, my wife runs it with me. We met in law school. So we're two people located in Southern California. And again, it's a passion project. It's not where I put most of my time, so it's something that I'm growing it, kind of bootstrapping it. And so my SOM is like, look, if I look around my backyard, there's about 17 law schools, 300 students per school. If I multiply that against my monthly rate, I get $3 million. And so suddenly I've calculated that lowest hanging fruit. I know where my SOM is. I know that in the first 5 years, within just driving distance and knocking on doors and making relationships, this is what I'm going to attack. So yeah, that's the boundary of my universe, but this is my first sort of beachhead where I'm going to go first. So now we have our ceiling, we have our floor. The next thing we're going to talk about is the SAM. And what's fun about the SAM is kind of like a more reasonable TAM. Like, a SAM is after you burst out of your SOM, after I dominate Southern California law schools, where am I going next? Like, what's the next logical plan? Wouldn't it make sense for me to expand to Canada? Why? I'm not licensed in Canada. I don't practice Canadian law. I don't know anything about Canada. So I'm probably going to stick to the United States. Where am I going to go to the United States? Probably not Louisiana, probably not smaller law school markets. Why would I? Why would I burn cash going after these sparse markets when I could go after Texas, the Bay Area, New York, all of these cities that have the highest concentrations of students? And so I start to calculate out, well, how many students are there? And what I come to is I'm like, oh, here's my SAM. My SAM is now a calculation of how much money I'm going to charge multiplied against how many students there are multiplied by the markets that I'm at. And this is an actual calculated market sizing. So the mistake I see a lot is people start with just the TAM. They start with like $10 billion, $5 billion, and they're like, again, if I get 1% of that. Investors don't fall for that. Like, no investor is like, oh, cool, because that's how it works. They want to know, what's the process? What's the strategy? They want to have confidence that you have an actual strategy in your head, and you just need gas in the tank to execute on it. And I hope By me walking through this with you, you're like, man, that guy really knows law schools. That guy knows where students are. He knows how much he's going to charge. Like that level of confidence is what you want to get into the minds of your investors, that you know that market that clearly. Now, let me pause for a sec. Who sees an issue with this slide? Is anyone, if you're an investor, you're reviewing my pitch, what's an issue that might stand out? Yes. I think, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so if you were, especially in an email deck, it's good to have little footnotes that will let them check your math. In a presentation deck, not always. You might put like according to this market research, but yeah, allowing them to have validation that your numbers are right, 100%. Anyone else notice something that stands out as a potential problem? Why wouldn't I get invested in? Yeah.
Or more design thing, having a colored universal thing, you're adding more colors to your pitch deck than you need.
Well, I haven't heard that. No, that could work. So too many colors can add visual complexity. Visual complexity can be distracting. Like, yeah, I'm a little offended because I designed this myself, but yeah. I'm just kidding. No, the one that I would say, what I would hit, if I put myself in the shoes of an investor being critical of myself, my TAM is super small. Like at the end of the day, $68.7 million, it's a pretty small TAM. It's something where, it's not too small. There might be some super niche investors, but if my goal is to be investable, I'd probably have to figure out a way to beef that out a bit. Either find a way to, for example, license it to maybe schools, have an enterprise edition, but trying to get that closer to at least $100 million, maybe a couple $100 million. There's no definitive line in the sand of what makes a big TAM, but under $100 million, you're definitely setting off is this a casual sort of passion project, which again, for me it is, but for you, if you're trying to raise capital, it should not be. Next on our list, we just mentioned it. Your go-to-market strategy is incredibly important because this is what convinces the investors that you're not going to use their money as tuition. Like, it happens all the time. It happens where a startup pitches and they ask for a bunch of money and they don't actually have an articulable way that they're going to deploy that money. They don't know, do you have to hire a team? Do you have everyone already that if it's software development, do you know where your developers are going to be found? If you're manufacturing, do you have a manufacturing partner identified? If you have any gaps in your vision from where you start to where you exit, have you addressed those? Or again, are you expecting me to give you money knowing that you're just going to figure it out later? Because if that's the case, I'll wait. I'll wait until you go figure that out, maybe fail, and that saves me from having to invest, or you figure it out, you're worth a little bit more money now because it's de-risked, but now it's de-risked to the point where I'm willing to roll dice that you have it figured out. I always like to think of this as like when you are planning a road trip when you were younger and you're trying to convince your parents to let you borrow the car or get gas money. They want to know where are you starting? And the more specific you can be with them, the more of a chance that you're actually going to get that gas money from them. They want to know okay, this day we're going to do this, and then we're going to go pick up this person, and then we're going to go drive here. Like a full agenda, what it communicates to investors is that confidence level. That when I take your money, tomorrow we're going to have an ad campaign through this network that targets these individuals in these markets. After that, we're going to leverage our partners in these states, where we have a manufacturing partner identified here. They already have our specs. We just need cash in order to buy. Like that story where the only missing component is the money to make it happen is what investors love, because that's super de-risked. That's ready to go. It's literally just gas in the tank. The next thing, competitors. One of the biggest mistakes I hear is I don't have a competitor, or there are no competitors. And either A, it's always just not true because you either didn't Google enough, you didn't dig enough to find the bones of maybe a company that used to exist and now is out of business. And I still want to know about it. I still want to know, why did it fail? Why did it go under? But people always want to act like it's a bad thing to have competition. The way you should look at it is that it validates your problem. A good example is if you were the first mousetrap, if you were legitimately the first person to ever think, you know what, I want to put a wood plank and a spring and a thing and some cheese. And if you were the first person to have this idea, you could technically go tell your audience, hey, I'm the first mousetrap. The problem with that is that if that is really true, what it tells me as an investor is you're gonna have to educate your audience on why this is effective, why I should use it, why everything. Like, why does the market need this weird contraption that you've created? But if we identify the fact that the competition is a house cat, like if we talk about like your market knows it has a rodent problem and your market has used what technology it has to solve a rodent problem, which is a house cat, if we identify that, then that validates that there is a rodent problem that people are trying to solve. And right now they're solving it with a biologic thing that I have to feed, that doesn't always work, that doesn't work 24/7. I start stacking reasons that my mousetrap is better than it, and I start to develop what is a competitive matrix. I start to develop all the value propositions that my market cares about. The ability to catch multiple mice in a day, the ability to have a cheap reusable product, the ability to be reliable, like all the things I know my market wants. And it's incredibly important that you zero in on, again, if your pain is real, a market without competition isn't really a market. Like we're at that level of efficiency in the market where generally, if your pain is real, the market is solving it somehow. Even if the way they're solving it isn't completely an analog to what you're doing, I wanna know how far they're willing to reach to solve it so I can appreciate your solution that much more. So if we were talking about the airline industry, who can think of a couple competitors to the airline industry? Go. Oh, no, out of all airplanes. So the airline industry as a whole competes against cruise lines? What? JSX? What is that? Oh, the private, oh, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, I don't fly that, so I didn't know about that. But yeah, I've seen the ads. Yes?
You're talking about airlines?
Yeah, so if I'm an airline, who am I competing against? Yeah, if I'm American Airlines, I'm competing against Ryan Airlines. That's a good one. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Trains? Sneak.
So Ryan is his name, but Ryan, think about what happens in the water. I know you're trying to save the whales. Is there another transportation you can use in the ocean instead of a plane if you want to get somewhere? There you go.
You nailed it, man. You nailed it. So cars, trains, boats. Like if you were thinking broadly, I wish I could have Uber for submarine. I like your thinking. I like your thinking. So if we are thinking of the problem as moving people or even moving things, then the solution is just other ways to move it. So we think about cars, we think about trains, we think about submarines, we think about boats. Those are all common things we think about. Like, okay, the problem is I need to get this from this area to that area, so I need to think about other things that move things in 3D space. But what we've learned, as you predicted, what COVID revealed is that airlines, their business model actually heavily relies on subsidizing the cost of regular people like us with the price of an business class tickets. So the airline industry, their business model on the back end heavily relies on $2,000, $3,000 tickets to executives to physically fly themselves to a location, to meet, to talk, to exchange ideas, and then to fly home. And because they charge way more for them, we're able to pick up our tickets for like $200, $300. And that's just the way it worked. And everyone's okay with that. Corporations are like, look, this is just how we do business. This is just our budget. We've already budgeted for it. But then COVID hit and everyone got used to Zoom. Everyone got used to just, telecommuting and realizing I don't have to go to the airport. I don't have to deal with traffic. I don't have to, and they got comfortable. The industry embraced Zoom, and airlines are still recovering from that. Because their business model wasn't just moving people or things. Their actual problem they were solving, when you looked at what the majority of their business model was the exchange of ideas, the ability to have two people communicate and share ideas, network with each other. And then when that's the problem that you're solving, then other entrants or anything that allows that as well. So competition, like dig deep, like don't be shy about thinking about what is my problem and how is it being solved? How is it actually being solved by the things that are out there? Once you have your competitors in mind, the next thing we want to do is have a competitive matrix. So you're going to start off by thinking about if I were in the shoes of my market. So imagine you're the customer or potential customer. You're on Google searching for something like I'm going to use you because we talked earlier, so I know your product. So if I'm like, oh God, I hate cleaning my bottle's hard to clean. I hate having to have different size bottles. Is there any, like, people will put out into Google and search engines and things like the problem that they have. And so what you're trying to do is think about what are the value propositions that your market cares about when they are assessing your solution versus the solutions of others. Usually it's going to be price, accuracy, how fast it is, your customer support. If you have certain features, like right now, I don't know if you have heard of AI, but it's all the rage. Once we identify these value props that your customers care about, we're going to put them in something called a competitive matrix. A competitive matrix has two important value props to your investor audience. The first is, I know nothing about you and your competitors, and so this quickly educates me on who are you going up against? Who do I need to be worried about in your market, and what is your market going to compare you against, and why are you better? So the first thing is it educates me on, again, who are the other players in the market that I need to know about? But it also educates me on what are those value propositions that you've identified as being important to your market? What are they going to pick you over them based on? Price, accuracy, quantified as best you can. And so very quickly I get a feel for, do I think you can hold them off? Or do I think that your solution is novel enough to make customers want to switch to you? A common example that we see is it'll be a SaaS product, and they'll compare themselves against other, social networks. I always see this. So it'll be like, no social network has built-in crypto emojis or something like that. And that'll be their whole, everyone else has picture sharing and commenting and friends and this or that, but nobody else has crypto emoji sharing. Okay, so I believe you, but now I'm thinking, what's stopping anybody else from doing that? Like, what's stopping Facebook? Or like, if that's literally the only thing that separates you from them, it's not convincing. I want to see a persuasive sort of barrier to entry of all the things that make you amazing, that it's going to keep them at bay. Now I'm going to stop here again. What's the problem with this slide? Who sees an issue on this slide that I encounter like at least 5 times per week? You're yeah. Not. Yeah, okay, that's a good one. So in an actual competitive matrix, we don't just have checks everywhere. If it's a yes or no binary kind of question, then yeah, a check will let me know either you have it or you don't. But for like pricing, having a price actually quantified is great. Having actual actionable information that I can gauge it without just wondering like, okay, what does a check mean for accuracy? 80% more accurate, 3 times as more accurate, whatever it's going to be. Anything else stand out? Like if I was an investor looking at this, what would be like something that would cause an issue in my head? I'll go.
You can't see which one's yours.
I'll go, well, my iconography, this would usually be your brand up here. So you'd be like, this is me, and then this is all them with their logos.
Competitor D has nothing, so is that really competitor?
Yes. Everyone always throws in someone with no checks. And if you don't have a check, they're not a competitor. So either A, get rid of D, get rid of that person, or B, expand your value props to a level where you can show me where they compete. Like I want to see, like if this is someone, if these are the 3 other competitors that I need to worry about, and these are the things that the market cares about, and this is how you compete, and if you don't have these features, your market doesn't care, then how are they doing so well? That either communicates to me that like you don't actually know your competitors enough to be able to break out those value props, or you're just trying to fluff it up by adding, some random company that isn't really a competitor, but you want to, you throw Facebook in there because you want to beat up on Facebook. Like, look how great we are compared to Facebook, but you're a travel company. And people are like, well, why is it even there? All right. So now we're at the point where I understand your problem. I understand your solution. I understand that there's money to be made, so I'm paying attention. Your go-to-market strategy shows me you have confidence in your ability to execute on that market sizing. Next up, I want to know about how you're going to make money. And it's crazy to me how many startups forget this. I went to a conference. I won't name names because we're being recorded right now, but it's a large conference that has hundreds of startups pitch, 200 something. I sat in on 60, and 40% of them forgot to list a business model. Like They just didn't explain to the audience, like how are you gonna make money? Do you have a subscription? Do you have is it a SaaS-based model? Do you sell hardware? Is it a disposable? Disposables like your, what's it called? Your razor blade, razor head type of model where you're selling something, but then they're gonna have to keep replacing one of the components, and that's how you make your money. I wanna know about your margins. I wanna know something that lets me use my brain to decide, like, do I believe you? Am I impressed? Like, are those really good margins? Do I believe that you figured out your business model? Because that's another telltale sign of an early stage company, is sometimes they don't know yet. And again, that's fine. Starting a company is a spectrum, and if you're early stage, you might not have a business model ready. But a company that knows a business model is worth more than a company that doesn't yet. And so if you have a business model figured out, I want to see it. I want to see it actually broken apart in your pitch. Next up is our traction. By the way, how are we doing on time?
It is 5:45.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Well, the rest of these go a bit more quicker than the first one, so we'll get through it. Okay, so the next one is traction. It's pretty obvious. At some point, I just want to know, what proof do you have? Because everyone's always telling me that I have a great idea, everyone needs this, but then the question's always, what proof do you have? Like, have you done surveys? Did you do the lean startup method where you go talk to 100 people and then, gather information about what their feedback was? Do you have studies from some third party kind of verifiable thing that I can trust that shows, like, yeah, this actually works because there's science behind it? Do you have sales? That's a great way. If you ever have sales, that's kind of one of the king traction. If you can show people are willing to pay for it, I don't necessarily need to understand it as clearly as I would otherwise, because I can just be like, all right, well, cool. People are paying for it, so that's a way to kind of validate the traction. And since subscribers is also another way. Even if they're not quite paying for it, if you have that freemium model that hasn't converted, the fact that you have thousands of subscribers is a way to convince me, like, okay, you've struck a chord in the market that I can believe. Similarly to the competition slide, we are now at the IP moat slide. So this is all about the idea of, like, if you actually convinced me that there is a market worth attacking and that you have a way to attack the market and that there's a ton of money to be made and people want it, if you've convinced me of all these other things, what I want to know is, like, how are you going to prevent some other established company with money from just railroading you, from just like being like, that's a great idea, I'm going to steal it? Because why? Because you can't stop me, because ideas are, yeah, like, we all have ideas and that's a good idea. I'm going to take your idea unless you have either a patent, which is kind of the king IP mode. A utility patent specifically is a great way to say, no one else can do this but me because I have a 20-year government protected monopoly on this. So that's kind of your de facto. But it doesn't have to be necessarily a patent. It can be some proprietary trade secret. It can be even a trademark to an extent. Can be a fun barrier to entry if you're able to popularize that trademark enough. Like, if people associate your brand with something, you're the only one that can use that brand, you can leverage that for an incredible amount of value. The Kardashians are the best example of that. It doesn't matter what they sell. They have so much momentum behind their brand. They put it up on their TikTok, they sell out, but they own that trademark. What's fun about a trademark is that it never expires. It's not like a patent. So in some ways, trademarks can be more powerful than a patent. There's different levers you can pull. The idea is, what do you have though? Like, you don't have to always obsess about just one of these different types of levers. The idea is, I want to know, do you have anything? Do you have anything that's going to prevent all those other people in the market that you just told me are out there from being like, I just heard this great idea, let's do it? That's one of the fears of investors. They don't want to essentially be R&D for your competitors. All right, we're finally down to the team and advisors slide. So you'll notice, like, generally speaking, kind of far in the slide deck, further than some people want to think, because people want to think, well, it should be like slide 4 or slide 2, and like it depends on the audience, but generally speaking, at this point, you should have the investors realizing or believing that, man, this is a great idea. It's a real pain. It's a huge market. They have great barriers in. Like, everything is great about this. The next logical question they usually have is, are these the right people? Is this the right team to execute on it? Because I can have some amazing idea of, like, how we're gonna, like, land on Mars and grow food or something, but when you look at my background, you'd be like, well, okay, Like cool that you thought of some unique idea with a bunch of money and a bunch of market. Yes.
Do you have any idea how to find advisors?
Yeah, so I would say first off, leverage lowest hanging fruits. So UCI has an amazing network of entrepreneur networks and EIRs and mentors. So that's probably like a great low hanging fruit. You can also look at, depending on what industry you're at, there's groups like SCORE is a great nonprofit. We have Octane LaunchPad. We have a lot of different events where people show up and you can meet potential board members or mentors. I say you always start with what do you hope to gain from the mentor? Work your way back. So if your deficiency is in like marketing or something, then that helps me figure out, okay, I need to find someone with marketing experience and then, figure out a way to connect with them, share with them, go from there. But happy to chat more about that and different options that I know about in the community. So at this point, again, we're trying to convince the audience that you can be trusted with their money, that you have the right team, you have the right experience, you have the right background. I have seen really arguably bad ideas raise money because they had a really great team. And on the flip side, I've seen really good ideas not raise money because the team was just someone that the investors couldn't trust, or not trust in like like they're sneaky or something, but there's no confidence that they'd be able to execute on the plan that they delivered. So the jockey, you'll hear a lot of investors say like the jockey is more important than the horse. So building out your team, knowing your team, being able to display the team is super important. How you display them in a deck like this, in a presentation deck, is always a bit tricky because everyone wants to put like their whole biography up on the slide, which no one can read. Like the whole goal right here for a presentation slide is I want to control your eyes. I want you to look where I want you to look. I want you to read what I want you to read. I don't want you to get distracted by things or, zone out or something. And so being able to have your big, bold, professional looking photo, we all have really fancy cell phones. There's no reason you shouldn't have a solid photo. This one I actually took in the hallway of my house and then photoshopped out the background to make it look like I was, on a skyscraper. I thought was the brand I was going for. But again, it's super simple. It took 20 minutes and it works for what I'm looking for. But it just helps. It's those little touches. Of course, you're not going to not get money because you don't have the perfect photo, but all these little touches and little shines can show that, okay, this team has it put together. So professional photos are great. Your name and title are obvious. This lets me know, do you have the right people on your team? If you're a medical company, I want to see, does anyone on your team have a doctorate or have a background, some little letters at the end to let me know that they have some authority when it comes to medical technology. If you're a SaaS-based company, I want to look for a developer. I can't tell you how many times I see a technology company with no CTO or no technical founder. And so then the question in my head is, well, how are you going to build it? Like you've shown me that your team is incomplete and you haven't provided information for me to know how you're going to solve that. So it's just one more way for me to validate, is this the right combination of people? The next thing is brag points. Don't be humble. The goal is to really show them, what things have you accomplished? What have you done? What things are relevant to the topic that you are working on now? Oh, I have to update this slide. I had 3 clients come in with, we're over 400 million now. So anyways, these are the topics that you want people to be like, oh, wow, I want to have a second meeting with those people. That's what I want to lock in on. It's not a whole biography that I know they're not going to read, especially when you have multiple people. It's just those sweet bullet points that let me know of your competence and your background. And logos are great. What logos do is they take advantage of the fact that companies have spent billions of dollars ingraining their logo into your brain so that you can recognize it quicker than you can read. Before you can read McDonald's in Times New Roman, you see the M and your brain knows McDonald's. Before, if I were to write out Y Combinator in Times New Roman, again, you would know what that is, but you immediately, when you saw that orange square next to the combinator next to it, your brain just knows and it adapts that. So I'm always encouraging companies, use logos. You work for Johnson & Johnson, but I had to read Johnson & Johnson. If you just had that logo, I would immediately perk up and know. It's kind of like NASCAR to an extent. The easy iconography helps it hit or stay in the people's minds a bit longer. Okay, this is one of the hardest slides that you will work on, which is your financial slide. So your 5-year financials, let's start off with what not to do. So this is actually from a slide from a client. No one will read this. Like, we all have this belief when we pitch that if I put it on the deck, everyone will read it and appreciate it. But no one will read this for 2 reasons. One, because none of us want to. Nobody actually wants to read every number and comma and word on the slide, so we won't. The other reality is it takes time to read. Like, you're probably only going to be on this slide, depending on how long your pitch is, for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. You can't appreciate everything that's going on in the slide in 60 seconds. And so what we have to do is we have to refine it a bit. Another thing to keep in mind too is, like, we all know that in year 5, you're not actually going to make exactly this much money. We know it's a projection, and so it's okay to round up a bit. Because, again, what value is lost by me rounding up? I'm not lying to you any more than I was before with my estimation and my approximation, but now you can actually read and consume numbers. We're still a little bit wordy though, because now we're still have 420 characters. This might be able to be read or appreciated in a minute. Probably not. It's going to be on the heavy end. So what we want to do is we want to drill down to, like, what do investors actually care about? Which is usually going to be revenue, EBITDA, excuse me, things that help them evaluate you as a potential investment of theirs. Suddenly, this is much more digestible by investors, much more digestible by the audience. But even that's still kind of boring. So we want to bring in some visual guide that helps me actually see that revenue ramp, that growth, that point where you start to make money, where you start to kick in, for 2 reasons. One, this again makes you draw a line in the sand. This makes me actually see, do you know your numbers enough to even through imagination come up with a projection? People are always like, well, the numbers aren't real, and so what does it even matter? It matters because a company that can at least do this is worth more than a company that can't. Like, a company that has no idea what the next 5 years looks like is more risky than a company that can at least show me this. Why? Because I can ask questions about this. I can be like, well, wait a minute, like, what happens in year 4 that manages to multiply your revenues by that much? And I can start asking you questions, and then you can answer with your go-to-market strategy. Oh, in year 4, we're going to leverage a partnership. Yes?
So would this kind of simplified system work for both presentation and email decks, or just presentation?
So for an email deck, you could get a little bit more into having some of these other categories that they might be interested in, but not, I still wouldn't go overboard. I'd keep this more as an appendix and still have a more simplified version. Not as simple as this, because with an email deck you could provide, you could probably get deeper into maybe your margins or maybe your cost of goods sold or something like that. You have more room to play with. But the appendix side is where, like, you want to get them interested and then have them think, okay, let me dig into it. Let me see where the numbers go. So yeah, a little bit more, but not too much more. Because again, the goal is to sell them on that story where they understand and they believe how you're going to ramp up and how you're going to have that revenue ramp. This is an example of one of my clients that we were able to break down their market sizing into their path to revenue, and then they had a very complicated product that had 3 different markets they were going to try to attack in knee, hip, and spine. And so my goal for this was to show investors, hey, this is how we're going to unlock each market year by year. Here's how many cases and how many sites we're dealing with. Show them kind of the growth of the market, the growth of the penetration of that market, and the overall growth of the revenue. And again, it's not boring. Hopefully it's a little bit engaging, gets your eye moving. Arguably, though, it was a bit too much because I was trying to help them plan for a 9-minute pitch. Anything below 10 minutes is like a haiku where the magic is in the things you don't say. So we had to refine it a bit more. So we narrowed it in on this view. It doesn't have to look like this, but this is just the idea of, like, you can make a revenue slide engaging and interesting and something that people can immediately understand. Oh, I get it. I get where your market grows. I get where you expand without reading a whole table. If you try, like if you look into iconography and visualization and simplification. The most important slide in an investor deck, the thing that defines it as an investor deck, is the ask. Without an ask, it's not really an investor deck. And so the ask is like you asking for money. 48% of those companies that I reviewed at that event forgot to have an ask. Which again, and these people paid thousands of dollars to pitch at an investor conference, and at no point did they ever ask the audience for money. Maybe they forgot, maybe they just felt uncomfortable. It can be weird asking people for money, especially if you haven't raised before. I always like to say that the mindset you should have, the realization you should have when you ask for capital is knowing that it is an equal exchange between you and the investor. You might feel like $1 million is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Like it's a crazy amount of money. But the reason that the investors are there looking to invest is because they don't want to put it in a savings account. They have more money than they have opportunity. And so they are literally spending their time to look through opportunities to put cash into. And you have an opportunity that you're looking for cash. And if you can do the pitch with that level of confidence of like, no, I have a good idea. Like you will thank me. I have a vehicle to turn your $1 million into 10x, 20x. Like I have that ability that you can't get anywhere else on the market. That level of confidence is kind of that thinking that can get investors to think, okay, yeah, I think this is the right jockey for me. They have that level of confidence where they know how to execute. I don't have to worry about them. I've seen countless times where people get to their ask and they get a little, like frog in their throat. And so you want to practice it. You want to practice having the confidence of looking someone in the eyes and being like, I will give you this amount of money for this, this amount of company for this amount of money. And like have that kind of feeling of like, you're welcome. Like this is like the good for, you don't want to say that obviously, you don't want to be too arrogant, but just to feel that, because you have to appreciate that your startup has that value if you believe in it. It is a vehicle to multiply revenue in a way that most other vehicles do not have, and that is why you're pitching to an audience. But you have to ask. You have to have something. And even if you're not asking for money, let's say there's some of you in here that have a startup, but you're looking for advisors or you're looking for mentors. You're not necessarily at a point where you're looking for money. You can ask for that. You can ask for help or introductions or mentorship, but always have an ask. Anytime you have anybody in a room that is paying attention to you, ask them for something. Because otherwise it's just kind of like, what was the point of this story that you told me? Like it was exciting, but I don't know how to help you. I don't know what you need from me. I don't know what I can do. Like a call to action is what enables your audience to know how to engage.
So what are you trying to ask for?
Oh, we'll get to that at the end. That'll be my call to action. So I knew you were going to say that. In the back of my head, I'm like, oh, Ryan's going to call me out on this. All right, the next thing up is a use of funds. Use of funds is basically how are you going to spend my money? And so the idea is like, you have some money, you're going to put in some marketing, you're going to put some money into development, you're going to put some money into legal, but I want to know, like, what do you spend this money on? Another mistake I see is people are like, I need $5 million. And then my thought is, but why? Like, why not 4.9 million? Why not 5.2? Like, why 5? Because especially if it's a round number, I'm just guessing you grabbed a number out of your brain. But what I want to believe that you went through an exercise in math and thought process to be like, okay, it's going to cost this for this, it's going to cost this for this, it's going to cost this for this, and that means I need this much money or else we don't make it to our milestone or we fail or whatever it is. And that calculated number is in your ask. On the flip side, if it's just like, well, I see this a lot too, where they're like, how much money are you going to raise? Between 1 and 5. But what is it? Like, is it 1? Is it 5? Like, what is, you want to know, this is how much money I need in order to do what I want to do. At the end of this, or we're coming towards the end, exit strategy is an important slide that a lot of people forget. An exit strategy is like, how do I get my money back? So an investor only gets paid back if there's something called a liquidity event. It means that your company gets bought out, so you get acquired, and then the shares that I have get bought out for some premium, I get my money back. You do an IPO, which means my shares now go up on the market, I get my money back. Without a liquidity event, unless we talk, again, there's other ways to do it. You could have, certain payments and things and dividends and all that other stuff. But generally speaking, for an investor, especially early stage tech investor, without one of those two events, my money's just locked up in your piggy bank. Like I put my money into your company and now you're running it. And I want to know, like at the end of the day, like how do we get that money out? Like at the end of the day, when do I get a return on my investment how can I calculate how long that's going to take? That's going to be one of the most vital things for me to know. Do I put money in? Because I'm going to think, okay, what else can I do with that money right now that's going to have a quicker return? Do I believe in their anticipated exit? Do they have examples of other companies that they've exited at that price? Super important slide. It's what ties everything together. This whole story before this was making me believe that you actually had a problem worth solving and that you were the company to solve it and that no one's just going to steal your idea. And I'm all excited and pumped about this, but at the end of the day, my goal isn't to be excited. My goal is to get my money back with some multiplier. And so this is what communicates that to me and lets me know you've thought about that and you've thought about my feelings as the investor, because my feelings matter too. I want to know when the piggy bank gets cracked. Last slide in your deck, one that people commonly leave out is your summary slide. Summary slide is just you reiterating to your audience what are the most important factors about your company that you want them to walk away with. Knowing that, again, the goal is they've listened to you pitch, they're going to leave now, they're going to drive home, they're going to talk to their spouse, their loved one, they're going to go golf with a friend. What are those main bullet points that you want them to be able to recall? Like, oh, this company, they have great IP, like, or the market, it's this huge market. It's this, like, there's some things about your pitch that you can ultimately distill to 4 to 5 big bullet points about these are the things I want to make sure my audience walks away with. And with that said, yeah, that is my pitch, and my ask for you would be, if any of you have a pitch you're currently working on or need help with, reach out to us. We have a couple different options. So one option that I do for a lot of my premium clients is obviously we have a whole white gloves team that takes science and raw data and turns it into TED Talk style presentations with animations and visuals and flowing storyline. But I also work with Octane LaunchPad, which is a nonprofit grant-funded accelerator that helps with pitches and storytelling and all that other fun stuff. So for teams, especially student teams that don't necessarily have the budget, that's something where definitely reach out to me. I'll get you hooked into the system, see what you're working on, and see where we can help. But with that said, I will open it up for questions, and thank you for your time.
Only after we clap for you. Yay! Thank you, Shaun. All right, questions. Preguntas. Ryan, you got a question?
What?
You got a question?
What?
You got a question? We're in the question section. Think about a question. Okay, we're getting more
looking forward to
pizza,
your
that's
question.
fine. Other questions? A lot of information.
Yeah.
Yes, you may. Here's a microphone.
Hi, my name is Jay. Can you go back to slide 9 or point number 9?
Yep.
Please? I just want to share a kind of interesting point here. This is kind of I realized this a few months ago by myself. Real quick. When I look around the room right here, I see many of you have Apple products. Now, I eventually began to go back out there, and I'm sorry, it was actually point 9, team and advisors. One thing I found that's really interesting.
Well, you said slide 9?
I'm sorry, no, point number 9.
Point number 9. Oh, got it.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I didn't pay that close attention to get the number.
No worries, man. I was impressed. I was like, wow, slide 9. You really. All right.
So one thing that I will be doing that I haven't done before is the fact that when I look in the room, the majority of you all have Apple products. And one thing that has always been very intriguing for me is that I have always kind of minimized is that I worked at Apple once. That gets a lot of people's attention because I work in the IT space.
Okay.
Because Apple has a reputation of only hiring the brightest people. But it works. So it's a really critical thing, and I also be making that update to not just have the word, but to include the logo. Because it is more impressive now that I hear and I see it, that representation.
It'll pique interest. Now the follow-up will always be, well, what did you do at Apple? And if there's a connection between what you're doing now to that, so IT to IT, definitely that.
Correct. And
yeah.
Having worked at Apple, there is an NDA, but I can tell you I was one of the managers delivering a lot of their features and software products.
I didn't know they had NDAs. That's interesting.
You get an NDA at Apple.
Is that new or is it?
No, this goes back years. So I can only tell you I worked at Apple, but I can't go into the details of any of the products or services.
No, it's fascinating. I had a buddy at Apple, and I was always curious why he was so cagey about questions. But now, okay, lawsuits, got it. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
So say, my name is Kyle Sanders.
Yeah.
Say your competitive analysis slide.
Mhm.
In that section specifically, if you're segmenting maybe a couple different industries,
Mhm.
and you're listing out these competitors, are you gonna have like a competitive analysis like section where it's like your competitive advantage versus, because each competitor is in their own industry is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So it's like, because you are like segmenting all three of them, like your competitive analysis against each other makes them, I guess, not as strong, is what I'm saying.
So you're saying like instead of doing a head-to-head, you're doing like groups of
Yes.
companies? That can, I would say generally no, because I'm thinking like, what does that communicate to me? The goal is to always think about what am I educating my audience on? What do I want them to walk away with? And so I'm trying to think what would be actionable about some blended average of companies. I'm not saying it couldn't work. There's probably a situation, but generally what I want to know as an investor, what I want to know is specifically who are the other companies in this space that are doing something like you, and again, and what do customers care about? What is it? Is it purely pricing? Is it some feature? Is it when people are trying to figure, do I buy this or this, and they're thinking through those different features? I want to know that head to head, and if we just take everybody and group them up, that might work if you're doing definitely an email deck. If it is a very complex market where you're trying to disrupt multiple markets, maybe that would work. But I still want to know probably at some point in the deck, who are you actually competing with? Because I've seen general competition slides happen where, in the medical medtech world, where they'll be like, our technology uses this, but then there's X-ray and there's MRI, and then in those I'll show multiple companies that do X-ray and MRI, and that kind of gets me a feel of like, again, how you compete across an industry. But I still want to know who are the top players in the market, and yeah, because it helps me make a decision of like, do I believe that you could outcompete them? How do I believe you can compete with them? What type of capital might it take? It gives me a preview into like, do I believe you could accomplish these features and make a dent in the market? So, yeah, email deck, definitely more information if that you think that adds clarity. Pitch like this, probably not, unless there's literally no way for you to have a head-to-head against another company. So.
Yeah, that's what we more or less did.
Oh, are you guys on the same team?
Oh no,
Yeah.
different teams with I think same reference.
Yeah, so we're taking like perhaps different components and features from different industry competitors, and then we're putting them into one, is what basically our struggle in our competitive analysis sections.
Okay, what I like about this, and I don't know if people can see it in the audience, what I like about this is it's simple, good iconography, using brands instead of just listing them out. And then underneath it, again, what do I take away from this? I take away high-level pains or high-level issues. So you have painful experience with brokers. Okay, absence of transparent application process. Okay, I kind of understand that, but I don't really, like, that might need to be unpacked a bit. Inability to save on move-in costs. Okay, that sounds more like you're trying to convince me of a value prop you're going to offer. Like, is the market looking for that? Like when I'm looking at Trulia versus Zillow versus one of these other, am I being like, oh, I'd go with them if they help me with my moving costs? Probably not. It's probably not a feature. It's something you could educate the market on, convince them it's worth, coming to us because we have this. But I want to see, what does your market right now identify as their pain? Again, if you're the mousetrap, the pain is I have too many rodents, I got to kill them. If your market is has something to do with people moving, then yeah, time is definitely one. The amount of time it takes, we can all identify with that. It takes way too much time to identify apartments or homes. Other pains would obviously be costs associated with it. Other pains might be amount of inventory. One of my clients competes with Zillow and apartments.com, and on their competitive matrix, they have 10 times the amount of inventory. And so again, the value prop is when you're looking, you want to look. You want to know what's available. And if they only have like 1,000 options, you're not going to use it. Even if it's the best feature, you're not going to use it because there's not enough inventory. I want to go to the site that has like the Google of results. And so that's where they compete. So their value prop is like, the competitors have limited inventory, and then we have X% more inventory, things like that. So yeah, this is, there's no like good or bad. Let me take that back. There's definitely some bad slides I've seen. Yeah, there's definitely some bad. I want to go that far. But I was like say, like, it is a spectrum. It's about optimization. Like when you pitch to an investors, it's about recognizing that they have red flags in their head, and your job is to diffuse as many as you can within a period of time, knowing that you'll never get them all. You'll never diffuse every issue that they have with you. But what you're trying to do is empathize with the audience enough to anticipate and diffuse as many of those issues as you have. And so that one, I like that slide. Do I think it could be better? Yeah. Like I think it could be more quantified, calculated, something where I could walk away when I go have dinner with my wife. She's like, "Do you see a cool startup?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I saw a startup. You know that they're 2 times more of this. Do you know that they're 40% less cost of it?" Like that allows me to get excited about it. We're right there. It educates me. But if I'm not interested enough to have a second meeting, then I go to the next one, and then you've lost me from that second meeting. But overall, like well designed. Like who designed that deck? Is that you? Oh. Oh, is that a reference deck? Oh, okay. Oh, that's a good looking deck. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So just
yeah, just the section right before on number 8, IP modes.
Yep.
So you described to, when we say IP modes, to describe the barriers to entry for many competitors. So while trademarks and patents and trade secrets, all of these stuff show legal barriers to entry, would something such as like just a drastic difference in manufacturing processes versus from additive to subtractive manufacturing?
Yeah, because that would be, the way you'd spin it is novel proprietary manufacturing process. That is something that gives you an edge, maybe in costs or maybe in quality of outcome. But the way that you protect that is, the question becomes, is the thing that you just told me common knowledge? If it is, then I don't care. If it's not, then is it a trade secret, meaning that it's not patented, but no one else really knows about it, so you have an advantage because it lives in your head? Is it patented, meaning that you've shared it, but now you're the one who can do it? At the end of the day, if you have a clever idea like that, it's the beginning of an IP moat. But the moat happens when you convince me that, again, it's not just well-known information, or it is well-known, but we're the only ones that can do it. Like those are the two options.
What if it's just like a high overhead cost for existing brand leaders to be really able to change effectively into a different system? Okay,
so the argument would then probably fall more under probably business model. Business model and then competitive advantage would be the two that comes to mind. So in your competitive advantage, I focus mostly on what customers are looking for. You can also include in there like key components that differentiate you from the competitor in terms of your cost structure or how you manage like resources, things of that sort. But it wouldn't be an IP moat, because IP is specifically some way to protect your intellectual property. And what you've described is a practical moat due to like companies getting ingrained with like how they. I have a solar client that's dealing with this right now. The solar industry is built on technology that hasn't changed in 40 years. They've invested hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in ways that they create these solar cells. They have a new way to do it. And they have some soft IP, but it's also based on some concepts that have been known for a while, so they're not as confident about their IP. But they know that these competitors aren't just going to throw away all their machines overnight and switch over. What's going to probably happen is they're going to enter the market, prove themselves, and then at some point they might try to copy them, but they'll be so deep in the market that they won't catch up. So to answer your question, that is valuable information. I wouldn't consider it IP without some protective layer. I'd consider it more like a business model advantage or a competitive advantage.
So if we're in like an email deck, for example,
yeah,
that would be somewhere between section 5 and 6.
Yeah, I would put that either in 5 and 6, depending on how you frame it, because it comes down to like, this is what sets me, it's an unfair advantage that I have, something that isn't mine, isn't proprietary, but the reality is that it gives us an advantage and lets us kind of know that our competitors can't just flip a switch and copy us, which is a big fear of investors.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Questions on that side? Right next to you, there you go.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mary.
Hi.
I have a question. I guess this concerns the ask part.
Mm-hmm.
but also the team and advisors. So I've been a one-woman show with my skincare company, and I'm to the point where I need to hire some people who can do the things that I can't do. I can sell face-to-face, but I'm not a technical person, and e-commerce would really help the growth of the company and
Makes sense, especially for that market, yeah.
really boost sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I'm not sure what to look for in someone with those skills.
Okay.
So, should I start with advisors and then move into hiring and use my investor money for that? Or should I just go straight to an investor that can help me make those hiring decisions right away?
So, depends on who you're missing. If it's a core person that's driving strategy, driving operations, then I'd say you got to figure that out first, because you probably won't have an investor to talk to, because it's going to be hard to get investment money knowing that you don't have those key roles. If it's something like you're lacking just a sales team, that's something where, you know, that's arguably an easier thing that we can fix. Like, okay, you need people to sell this. All right, we'll ramp up when you have money, ramp up your engine. There's 1,000 different options for you to ramp up a sales team pretty easily. But if you don't have like a director of sales or a director of marketing or like a person to command those salesperson or salespeople, that then is more concerning, because the question is, well, then, like, it's easier than even if I give you money, trying to find that person might take a while. So I'm probably going to wait to give you money till you have that individual. So definitely start with advisors always. Now, again, I don't always like to go with like hard definitives, but you should always have advisors. I have advisors, I have mentors, just having people to bounce ideas off of and run things through to narrow in on who those hires should be. Because if you pitch and you don't have those individuals identified, but you at least know who you need to identify, and you have some understanding of how to target them, maybe even some candidates, that gets closer to that. I have a plan, I just need gas in the tank, and then you might get investor money. Now again, you're worth less than a company that has all those people already figured out, but you're worth more than a company that doesn't have any idea who they need. So it's always, again, that spectrum. But at least knowing what roles you need to fill, an idea of how you would fill them is, you know, mandatory, I'd say, when you're out there trying to raise capital. So in your case, if you're looking to hire, it sounds like marketing and maybe sales, or what are the roles where's your biggest gaps?
Definitely e-commerce, anything in the technical sphere.
E-commerce how though? Like e-commerce, like you need a TikTok influencer to show off your product, or e-commerce like you need someone to set up a WordPress and make sure it stays online?
Yes.
Okay.
All the above. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because if your biggest issue is just selling online, then you don't really necessarily need to hire a role for that. You can contract that out, have someone put up a Shopify account, and then e-commerce is something that, like, you don't really need a person to always manage it unless you have a lot of SKUs that are changing frequently, someone to manage your inventory and everything, maybe. But it sounds more like you need like a director of sales, or maybe someone that is owning the how do we identify customers, drive them to a thing, and then trade product for money. And so anyway, to answer your question, advisor to think through who you need to actually, who would provide value to you, figure out what that title is, and then ideally go find that person, or at least have an idea where to find them, and then go try to raise capital. Because then it's a story of I know who I need, I know what I need, I just need to afford them. But if I do afford them, this is what it unlocks for me. It opens up these markets. I believe I can have this increase in revenues. It's just a numbers game at that point. But we got to.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've made my money thus far by going into brick and mortar retailers, convincing them to sell the product, and having
Good for you, though. I mean,
having it in stores,
Yeah.
or spas, and I feel like there's a totally a side that's being neglected with my
100%.
business that I don't know anything about. So I need other people to fill that gap.
Reach out. Octane has an aesthetic tech conference. So we have a large amount of aesthetic startup companies and advisors, and so I'd be happy to connect you to folks and see what advice they might have. I think I know who you would need, but I'd rather defer to someone who's deep in that space to be like, oh yeah. I would guess it's going to be hardcore social media person that's going to be able to take advantage like trends and all the other stuff that seems to drive what I see from skincare companies. But that's just me looking from the outside. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Yes. Oh wait, let me. Yeah, I got it. Delivery. There you go.
Exit strategy.
Yes.
Is there another way to offer value rather than exit strategy? Sometimes products lose the quality when it's an exit, mass produced.
To an investor, no with an asterisk. If you are, so keep in mind that this whole pitch is with the mindset that you're pitching to an audience of general investors who are critical and ROI focused and looking at this as a vehicle to return money, basically more than they put in. Impact investors, so there are certain types of investors, usually in like clean tech or energy or education. There are some investors who are so passionate about an area that they're not as concerned with like a 20x whatever return on their money, and they're willing to look like this is a good solid investment, it's profitable, it's viable, it's still a business, but I care a lot about the thing they're doing, so I'm willing to put money in. But it still comes back to the idea of like, if you're an actual business looking to raise investor money, this is how they get paid. They get paid by either an exit, an acquisition, or an IPO. And so if you don't have that, then the money they gave you is more like maybe like a grant or something. It's something where like they believe in you, they believe in your mission, and so they want to give you money to make it happen. But the only reason they wouldn't care about one of those two things is if it was never really an investment in their mind. And I don't want to say like they don't exist. I've seen some of them in usually something clean tech related. It's a big passion area, but it's not as viable to try to raise capital from those individuals because there's just few of them. Like most investors are looking for, like, this is a strategy to have my money come back to me and be worth more. And there's really just technically three options. Because again, there's always a chance that you become so profitable that you throw off money as like dividends or something like that. And then that's how they make their money. But that's a really long-term strategy. So IPO or acquisition are the two big ones that give me, 5 years, 10 years down the line, I get X amount of dollars more. Yeah. Do you have a question yet? No, it's okay. Yeah.
So tech startup at pre-seed concept stage.
Okay.
Big market, plenty of a good team, a lot of execution done by every single team member.
Uh-huh.
But quite often in the the ask when you get down to the investors, like, well, how do you gauge that valuation where you're asking for that cap at I usually try to screen everything so that only investors, they already know we're concept.
Yeah.
So why are you meeting with us otherwise? But do you have in your experience, do you have a good? I have. I'm just getting ready to do a raise, and do you have an idea you've seen work to overcome that? If the startup has everything in sync, everything's all the boxes are checked, and you got the right target investor, right stage investor, everything's all hunky dory. Have you seen something that really works other than just me saying, well, comparing it to, there's plenty of pre-seed venture capital firms
Yeah.
that, kind of at this stage where we're at with our addressable market and our team
Yeah.
that are basing it off of $2 to $3 million cap right now or whatever.
Yeah.
Because we don't have product yet. We have everything, but we have a great team, they like the product and the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So any ideas on that?
That's a great question. That is such a good question. I feel like I'm going to update the presentation going forward to include something on that because it makes sense. Like that comes up a lot. Like, what do I do when I'm asking for valuation and whatnot? Honestly, I try to avoid pegging that in a pitch as long as I can, unless I know I have to include it. I don't try to get into I leave that for a later conversation. Like the whole goal for these types of pitches for me is to have a second conversation where we get into the details and I can talk about what
that's
valuation
actually my plan. But if they really want to talk about it, then great. That's a good question. If they're
if
they're really wanting to ask, then but usually I spread it out to a second meeting and here's a follow up 2 pages exit summary and and if you really want to meet says the meeting soon so I can because I'm meeting with 4 other investors this week and this tranche closes. When it closes. So
if they're one of the lowest hanging questions an investor will ask if you piqued their interest will be about deal terms because that's just like I want to know if it's even like in my investor thesis. I want to know if it fits into what I'm looking for. I want to know if I can sell it to my other investors I work with. And so I just want to know, okay, are we in the same universe? Is it worth talking more? And so you don't want to be too dodgy about that. Like at some point, if they're pushing on that, I've seen deals fall through. I work a lot with, again, I don't want to say any specific groups or venture funds, but I've seen that fall through, and we've chatted and kind of laughed about it later. We're like, man, if he just would have given me a number, would have given him that meeting. Which number do you pick? Market comps are a great
not so
way?
much. It's really defending the number because quite often you'll get the investor go, well, how'd you come up with that number? And it's not based on revenues. It's not based, typical, kind of a post-revenue argument, which is like, why are you putting? But I've had investors do that. I'm like, well, but you don't want to alienate them and go, well, that's a dumb question. I'm a pre-seed stage startup or concept stage, and but this is why you're going to give it to us because we have a great team, we have a great product, we have huge demand, so on and so forth. But anyway.
So let's
just in all your vast experience, I just thought.
Well, let me unpack
maybe you ran into that before, and you heard some brilliant answers from entrepreneurs like myself, that were trying to raise capital from, in a big market.
The bad news is that there's never there isn't like a quick. There's not one thing that I can think like this is the way to diffuse that. It's always going to be a spectrum. So again, like I put myself in the investor's shoes. If I was trying to figure out what you're doing, I know that it has to be I know that it has to be interesting enough to keep you interested. So I know that like if you're giving up 80% of the company or something like that for some low valuation, even if it's a great tech, I'm probably not interested because I need you to run it and be interested and have some upside. So I know there has to be enough meat on the bone for you, but the higher we go on the cap, the higher we go on what your valuation is going to be, the more I just start thinking like, well, what other investments do I have that I'm currently looking at that have, maybe a better ROI? What would it cost to just copy you? Like if you think your company is worth $100 million at the ideation phase, and I know that for like $2 million I can hire a team to do it. Like what's the delta between the two?
They won't be able to copy us.
Do you have patents? Do you have?
It's just
this is the level of confidence we're shooting for.
I've got a stack of innovation experience in my space for over a quarter century. And I tell the investors, I'm only showing you a third of the actual innovation, and I'll show you a little more the second meeting. Okay. And if you invest, then I'll show you even more to give you even extended confidence. But at the end of the day, I'm still not going to show you the bleeding edge stuff that we're going to do in year 2, year 3, because at the end of the day, how do I know until you invest? Yeah. How do I know you're actually not just kind of shopping me for information? Because I've had that done too, and even advisors that I've had, or people that were on my team, until they're like, fully, locked in.
I would say that is a bold strategy, especially in this investor environment, given the leverage shift and whatnot, because if they feel like they're not getting if they look at the amount of effort it takes to extract information, they might just be like, look, it's a great idea, but I don't know. It's, the amount of time it's going to take me, so they're going to pass on it. So it comes up to you. Like if you don't really need their money immediately, then you can definitely be more picky. But if you need money, if your runway's shortening, my advice would be, having to rework
That's good advice. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's very good. By the way, I've seen a lot. There's a very good summary here. It's great. And I just never stop learning. So I came here to look like, how could I make my deck better?
Yeah.
And I'd consider some advising yourself, professionally. But
if you go to my website, you can download a copy of the wireframe. You enter your email, and it'll send you like an overview of all the slides that we went over and how it works and whatnot. So, yeah, it's going to be VentureCraft.io because the guy that owns the .com is a jerk. No, so if you go here, you'll be able to find resources and content and stuff. Oh man, I went through the whole thing. The best rule of thumb I heard is like if you have a good name, if the choice is between a good name with not a .com versus like a not good name with a .com, you go the good name route. And I really like this, but yeah, man, it haunts me that. Oh yeah, I thought through that. I was like, oh man, .co.com. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together.
Yeah.
One more time for Shaun Sanders.
Thank you.
Now, if you asked a question, congratulations, you get a book. This is a Y Combinator partner. You asked a question. There you go. And she had she had ovarian cancer. And then she decided to come up with a way to detect it earlier. And then she built a company around it, sold it for $275 million. And she tells her story here. Who else asked a question? You asked a question? Oh.
Trying to get the question.
You want a book? You got one over there, sir? There you go. Anybody else? There you go. All right, just for the question that you haven't asked yet. How's that? All right, you can ask him afterwards. And you, sir, too. There you go. Without a doubt. Well, thank you, Shaun.
Yeah,
everybody,
pleasure.
there is still some pizza left over. Connect with him, and we will see you on the next one. And let's get a quick group photo. You can all stay sitting there. Why don't you go right there, Shaun?
Okay,
and then Angie, you can come over here. And then if you're not on that side, you guys should go over there. How's that? Like, you're upset, everybody else is happy. There you go. You can just kind of crowd around there, just make your way on the round. All right, all right.
No, you guys have to get out of the blind spot behind me.
Or you can maybe give him a chair. He can be maybe a sorority squad. Who knows?